The mountain does not care about your plans. It does not care about your gear or the courage you think you brought with you from the city. San Gorgonio is a monolith of jagged granite and deceptive silence that waits for the moment you look away from the trail. He felt the weight of the pack pressing into his shoulders like the hands of a heavy ghost. Every breath at 10,000 feet was a battle against the thinning atmosphere that tasted of cold stone and ancient dust. The group was only 50 paces ahead. Just 50 paces of sun-drenched trail and the casual chatter of friends, but the distance felt like miles as the shadows of the twisted pines began to crawl across the path like long, dark fingers. He stopped for one moment to adjust his boot. Just one moment to catch the breath that the altitude had stolen from his lungs. When he looked up, the trail was empty, and the silence of the wilderness crashed down on him like a physical blow. Missing 411 cases usually start like this. A blink of an eye, and a world that completely resets itself into something unrecognizable. The voices of his companions didn't fade. They simply ceased to exist as if the mountain had swallowed the sound whole. He called out a name. But the sound was flat and dead, muffled by the heavy branches that seemed to lean closer with every passing second. The air grew suddenly cold. A sharp, biting chill that smelled of wet earth and something metallic. He tried to follow the path, but the trail beneath his feet felt different. The dirt too loose. The rocks too sharp. It was as if the mountain had shifted its skin while he was looking down, rearranging the geography to ensure he would never find the way back. Panic is a slow burn that starts in the pit of the stomach and turns the blood to ice. He looked at the trees and saw faces in the bark. Cruel, wooden expressions that watched his every stumble with a silent, hungry patience. The sun began to drop behind the peaks, bleeding a deep, bruised purple across the sky that offered no comfort. Night in the San Gorgonio Wilderness is not just an absence of light. It is a presence of something ancient and predatory. He reached into his pocket and found a handful of candy wrappers, the plastic crinkling with a sound that felt like a scream in the oppressive quiet. He dropped one by a tree, a desperate breadcrumb in a world that was actively erasing his existence. The wind began to howl through the canyons, but it didn't sound like wind. It sounded like 1,000 voices, whispering secrets just out of reach. He clutched his dark olive-green hiking jacket tight against his chest, trying to hold in the last remnants of his human warmth. He found a small rocky overhang to shield himself from the freezing air, but the shadows beneath the stone felt deeper than they should have been. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt the sensation of the ground tilting, as if the mountain were trying to roll him into a crevice. He pulled out his camera, his fingers trembling so hard the plastic casing clicked against his teeth. He needed to see. He needed to know what was standing just beyond the reach of the moonlight in those thickets of mountain mahogany. The first flash of the camera was a blinding explosion of white in the blackness, illuminating the gnarled roots and the jagged rocks for a fraction of a second. In that moment of light, he saw nothing, but the silence that followed felt even heavier than before. He fired the flash again, and then again, a rhythmic strobe light of desperation that echoed the frantic beating of his heart. The photos he took were not of the landscape. They were close-ups of his own eyes, wide with a terror that no human language could ever describe. The lens captured the reflection of something in his pupils, a shape that was tall and thin and did not belong to the geometry of the natural world. It was a silhouette that stood perfectly still, waiting for the batteries in the camera to finally die. By the second day, the search and rescue teams were swarming the lower slopes like a line of neon ants. They brought helicopters that thrashed the air and infrared sensors that promised to find the heat of a living soul in the frozen dark. But the mountain had gone cold, colder than the winter snows that gripped the summit well into the month of July. The thermal cameras saw only the gray indifference of the stone and the deep blue void of the canyons. They brought the bloodhounds, professional trackers with noses that could find a single scent molecule in 1,000 acres of forest. These dogs had found lost hikers in swamps and deserts, but at the edge of a specific rocky clearing, they stopped. The lead dog began to whine, a high, pathetic sound that vibrated with a primal fear. It backed away from the empty air, its fur standing on end as if it were looking at a wall that the human rescuers could not see. The handlers tried to force the animals forward, but the dogs laid down and tucked their tails, refusing to cross an invisible line that marked the boundary of the missing 411 zone. Beyond that point, there was no scent, no tracks, nothing but the wind. 6 days into the search, they found the candy wrappers, lying in a neat, straight line that led directly toward a sheer cliff face. There were no footprints leading to them, and no signs of a struggle in the soft pine needles surrounding the site. It was as if someone had placed them there from above, or as if the earth itself had spit them out as a final, mocking gesture. The wrappers were clean, unweathered by the wind and rain that had battered the mountain for nearly a week. Then they found the camera, sitting perfectly level on a flat stone at the edge of a deep ravine. The strap was neatly coiled, and the lens cap was missing, lost somewhere in the chaos of the night. When the investigators developed the film, they didn't find the mountain, and they didn't find the trail. They found 12 images of a man descending into a state of total psychological collapse, his face contorted into a mask of pure, crystalline dread. In the background of the final photo, the trees appeared to be bending at impossible angles, folding in on themselves like paper. The horizon was skewed. The sky, a color that didn't exist in the spectrum of a California sunset. The spatial distortion of San Gorgonio is a phenomenon that few talk about, but many have felt. It is the sensation of the mountain growing larger while you walk, of the peaks moving further away even as you climb toward them. Some believe that these high-altitude wilderness areas contain pockets of unstable reality, places where the laws of physics are as thin as the oxygen. In these zones, a man can step behind a tree and emerge in a version of the forest that has no exit. The missing 411 research suggests that these disappearances often occur near granite formations and bodies of water. San Gorgonio is a fortress of granite, a place where the Earth's magnetic field fluctuates and compasses spin in useless circles. He was never found. Not a single bone. Not a single shred of his olive-green jacket. 1,000 people searched for him for 2 weeks, covering every square inch of the terrain with a fine-toothed comb of human effort. They looked in the caves and they looked in the trees. They rappelled down the cliffs and waded through the icy creeks. But the mountain had closed the door, and whatever was on the other side was not coming back. The case of the hiker on San Gorgonio is a stark reminder of the predatory nature of our national parks. We think of them as playgrounds, as places for recreation and photos, but they are ancient territories that belong to things we no longer remember. The silence that remains after the search parties leave is the most terrifying part of the story. It is a silence that hums with the energy of the unseen, a vibration that tells you that you are being watched by the very ground you stand on. This mystery is not an isolated incident. It is a recurring nightmare that plays out across the globe. A similar disappearance occurred with Matthew Weaver near the Topanga Lookout, where his vehicle and belongings were found in a small area that had been searched repeatedly. Yet he vanished into the air without a single trace. Both men were there one moment, and gone the next, leaving behind only the cold artifacts of their final minutes. The mountain takes what it wants, and it keeps what it takes. When you go into the high places, stay close to the light, and never trust the silence, because sometimes the trail doesn't lead home. It leads to the edge of a world that you were never meant to see. The darkness of San Gorgonio is waiting for the next person who thinks they are alone. They will feel the air grow thin. They will hear the wind whisper their name. And they will realize too late that the mountain is moving. Stay safe in the wilderness, and keep your eyes on the path, because the missing 411 cases are only growing. The earth is shifting beneath our feet, and some of us are falling through the cracks. The end of the trail is not always marked with a sign. Sometimes it is marked by a camera left on a rock, and a silence that lasts forever. Good night. And watch your back out there in the tall pines. The shadows are getting longer now, and the sun is dipping below the ridge once again. I can hear the trees creaking in the distance. Or maybe it is just the sound of the mountain breathing. Don't go out after dark. And if you do, make sure you have enough light to see what is coming for you. The missing 411 secrets are buried deep, and the mountain is very good at keeping them hidden. Every year, More people vanish into the green abyss of our forests, leaving no clues and no answers. We build our cities and our roads, but the wilderness remains unconquered and hungry. The mountain is a predator that never sleeps, a sentinel of stone that watches the passage of time with cold, unblinking eyes. We are just temporary visitors in its house, and it can evict us whenever it chooses. The photos from that camera haunt the files of the investigators to this day, a silent testimony to a horror that cannot be named. They serve as a warning to anyone who thinks they can master the wild. The hiker in the olive jacket is just one name in a list that is thousands of lines long. Each name represents a life that was snuffed out by the shadows of the trees. We search for meaning in the data. We look for patterns in the dates and the locations. But maybe the pattern is simply that we are no longer at the top of the food chain once we leave the pavement. The high desert air is cold tonight, and the wind is picking up speed through the pass. I think I will stay inside where the walls are solid and the lights are bright. But even here, I can feel the weight of the mountain pressing against the window. It is always there, waiting for the next one to step off the path and into the dark. Take care of yourselves out there, and remember that the wilderness is not your friend. It is a mystery that we are only beginning to understand. And the price of that understanding is often a life. The missing 411 files are never closed. They only wait for the next chapter to be written in blood and shadow. Sleep well. If you can, the mountain is calling. But don't answer. It doesn't want to talk. It only wants to feed. Keep your camera close. But don't look at the photos until you are home, because you might not like what you see standing behind you in the flash. Final word of advice: stay on the trail, and never, ever, and ever look back. The story of the hiker on San Gorgonio ends here. But the mountain is still out there, shifting in the moonlight, waiting for you. Goodbye for now, and stay in the light. The mountain is hungry tonight. End of transmission. The wilderness is a dark place. Be careful. Very careful. Missing 411. Over and out. The end.